This is a Hilchas Shchita, an illustration in regards to the halachas that pertain to knives. The chalofim, namely in Daf Tezvav, Tezayin, in that area, as many of you are going to be learning Hilchas Shchita, Chulin now in Daf Yomi, you should all have Hatzlacha and Siyat D'Shmaya, and have wonderful comprehension. So there's a sakin called sakin oile v'yored. If you see, look at this knife is very thin. It probably started off its career this thick, but the shochet, as he was preparing his knife, working on different stones in order to sharpen it, it started to belly out. You see, when you have a knife like this and you see that the inside is more indented, it's called the sakin oile v'yored. What happens is, as he put his pressure onto the stone, he put more pressure in the middle. So therefore, it ate up more from the middle. When a person is working the knife, what they're supposed to be doing is equal pressure from the stone to the knife. You go up and down with the same exact pressure. If you push harder, then the knife bends and you end up bellying it out. It has no ramifications in halacha, sakin that's oile v'yored, afilu kama pamim, it's kosher as long as there's no pegimis. Now, one of the halachas of a sakin is that it has to have a ribua. It can't have a point, it can't have a spitz. If it has a spitz, then it's not a proper knife, because in Hilchas Shchita you have the 5 main halachas. Shia, drasa, chaloda, hagrama, ikor. Shihia, I'm going to illustrate on a larger knife. Whoa, this is a big one. Shihia is when you take the animal and you start to do a ma'aseh shchita and you hesitate. That's no good. It has to be a consistent flow. Oh, you're going to say, when I'm going like this and I pull back, obviously there's a moment that I'm stopping. That doesn't partake in the concept of shihia, because it's a constant flow going back and forth. So that's shihia. Drosa, doiris, you're chopping. Chaloda is stabbing, like a chulda, a weasel goes in and it stabs. Hagrama is a shchita that is not taking place in the right position in the neck. Shihia, drasa, chaloda, hagrama, ikur is a process of ripping out the simanim. When we talk about the simanim, we're referring to the esophagus and the trachea, the windpipe and the eating pipe. That when you cut through them, if there's a nick in the knife, or you use pliers to rip them out, that's called ikur simanim, and therefore such an action would render the behema a treifa, and therefore the shchita wouldn't be kosher. Now, as you see, there are different sizes in shchita of the knives, because each size pertains to a different animal. Because the size of the knife has kamala shnei tzavarim v'chutz mizeh, has to be the length of twice the neck. The width of the neck has to be here, and a mashu, and a little bit. So this is obviously for chickens, for turkeys, for ducks, for geese. It's actually even big enough because any fowl, any bird from a fowl, this would be at least 3 times the width of the neck. I like to illustrate this one because this knife is a Lublinsky. It was probably used by a shochet mumcha for many, many years until it actually got this thin. This knife is what they call a Miller knife. It's very, very hard to come by. This one is brand new. Miller designed a very unique alloy, and we don't know the secret to his alloy. As a result of that, it's been discontinued, and therefore it's become a collector's item. Sheikhdim love it because it holds on very strong, and it's easy to shtel, which means to prepare the knife. Shtel is a word in Yiddish for those of you that don't speak Yiddish. All right, so today we're doing some reverse engineering on Miller knives, and we've come out with a very interesting thing. There's something called a Rockwell, the hardness of the knife, and the type of stainless steel. All right, so there's something called a 440 stainless steel, and then there's different levels of Rockwell. Once a knife or a piece of metal reaches above like a 58 Rockwell, then you can't use the contemporary stones that we have, or natural stones or synthetic stones, because it won't be able to bite into the knife and remove some of the metal. You'd have to go into what's called a diamond stone. The diamond stones, once you reach, so where the assessment of a Miller knives is that the hardness of the knife is 55, 54, 56, that type of Rockwell, and therefore it's workable on a stone, but it's hard enough that it will maintain its chud, its sharpness. Now, here's a knife for a behema gasa, a very large animal, a bull. You'd come in and shecht. This knife is kosher. Now it's kosher. Now it's even kosher again. It's kosher again. This knife's kosher. It's galat. You check it out bisra on your palm. You feel it. You feel it has a bite. But tufra, you check it on your nail. Why? Because you want to make sure there's no hargashas. When there's no hargashas on a bisra and tufra, then you know bisra is meat. So then when you shech the animal and you enter the meat, it doesn't feel anything. And tufra is on the nail because the cartilage in the esophagus is similar to the nail. So if you check it with your nail, you don't feel anything, then you know that the animal won't feel anything. It's all about killing humanely, where there's absolutely no suffering to the animal. In the times of the Gemara, they used to check a sakin in water. And basically is, whenever you take something into water and you comb it through the water, it has a ripple effect. If there's a nekev, if there's a crack in the knife, so that ripple effect will now spiral out and be much bigger. As a result of that, yeah. So if the knife is perfectly clean, as you sweep it through the water, you'll see nothing. Lamaisa, we're not relying on any of those types of bedikas, and we're using just the bedika on abisra tufra, namely we're doing our fingernail bedikas. Now, there's something very, very important to know about the bedikas sakin. And this is, Sheikhtim do this to Rav Machshirim all the time. They want, because there are many Rav Machshirim that know shchita, and there are many Rav Machshirim that know halacha, there are Machshirim that know the Maaseh Yad, but they don't know. There's different types. And essentially there's a rule in the hargasha of a sakin, that if the sakin is dry, your finger has to be dry. If the sakin's wet, your finger has to be wet, because then it doesn't give contrary sensations. So let's say the Rav Machshir walks in and he says, "Can I check your knife?" And you say, "Absolutely so." If his hand's wet, so the sheikhah dries the knife to see if he'll dry his hand. And if his hand is dry, so then the sheikhah will take the knife and stick it into the water and give him a wet knife. So if the Rav Machshir checks the knife while it's wet and his hand is dry and he has anything to complain about, the sheikhah is going to immediately tell him, "Rebbe, you checked it wrong. Your hand was dry, so now he can't say anything." So not always is the Rav Machshir testing the sheikhtim. Sometimes the sheikhtim are testing the Rav Machshir. So fine. So here's a larger knife, because as you go through the Maaseh Shchita, you go back and forth. If the knife is too small, then there's the possibility that the corners will get stuck in the skin. As a result, it will cause a shihiyah, and therefore it will pass the shchita. Here's a smaller knife. Again, this is the famous Miller knife. This is a bit of a collector's item. And you shecht it. As you're shechting, this is for lamb. So lamb, in the yeshiva we've used these knives for the processing of lamb. Here's another Miller, but this one is slightly bigger than that one, but it serves for the same purpose. Now, in stones, there are many different types of stones. each stone has a different purpose. There are stones that are meant to take out deep pegimis, and there are stones that are meant to take out just very, very fine residue. One of my favorite stones out there is the white Belgium. This is a stone that is very, very hard to find. Recently, they started to harvest them in Belgium again. The white part is the part that you use. This is one of the most important stones because I believe it makes the sakin chad, chalak, and it can take out pegimis. Whereas other stones can take out pegimis, and then there are stones that make it very smooth. But if I had to be stuck in the woods with one stone, this is the stone I would choose because it can get the job done on everything. Now, there's something called grit. In stones, there's something called grit. Grit means to say, in the molecular structure, how much bite that is taking off the metal. So a really good finishing grit would be 10 to 12,000 grit. I know there's higher, but maybe it's not necessary. And for pegimis, the number actually drops, like a 6,000 grit. But to initiate the stone, to open up a stone, you probably want to go with a lower grit than 6,000, maybe 4,000, 5,000. Right? All of those stones, when I talk about grits, it's usually measured in synthetic stones. Because in the natural stones, it's hard to determine exactly what the grit is. And essentially, people are guessing, but it's an educated guess based upon the results and how the knife comes out. Now, one of the things that I'd like to show everybody, and it's hard to really illustrate. One of the things that in the process of doing a bedika sasakin, and it's brought down in the Gemara, they used to do a bedika sasakin le'or, to the or hashemesh. They used to look at the sun, and they'd be able to tell if the knife was perfectly smooth or not. Now, the way that works is that right now you see nothing at this knife, and the reason is because it's so sharp, it's so fine, that there's no location for light to reflect off the blade. But let's say I were to dull it up a little bit, right? I really don't want to do this, but for the sake of, ow, 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 ow. This is about I'm going to give myself a lot of work tonight. Now, I've just destroyed this knife, but as I look at it, because I put in nicks, right, and I shine it in the light, I can see the reflection of the light on the angle, and now I can see actually where the pegimis are and how deep they are. When we learn the Gemara, we're going to find cases upon which there's a pegima in the knife, but the pegima in the knife is, in other words, if I go forward smoothly, right, then it will never affect. It will never give. The pegima would not affect the sensation of the cow or the sheep's sensitivities. It won't feel it. For example, if the knife, it's straight, and then there's an indentation, but the indentation is coming in at an angle, right? So there's never something, if I'm going just forward, there's never something in the knife that will give a certain clip or pinch to the animal that will feel a negative sensation, because the indentation is going into the knife in such a way. Whereas when I pull back, then when it reaches that spot on the skin of the animal, it'll be ripping it. So let's say I have a pegima and I only go in one direction. So the Gemara discusses that exact case of the heter. Let's say I have a pegima at the bottom of the knife and I'm korech matlis b'shas atchak. And right, but let's say I do a shchita and I said for sure I didn't go to the place. Okay, whatever a person doesn't know about and doesn't think about and doesn't premeditate, then he can't say for sure he has an effect about it. Right. Another thing about shchita has to be koach gavra, has to be your actions. Let's say I put this into a mechanism that I trigger or I manipulate to move. So there's cases like that in the Gemara, and that would be also permissible. That would also be defined as koach gara. That it has to be an activity that is being involved into your action. You can do a shechita with many different things. The objective is that it should not be a type of material that will crack and flake off. I'm actually trying to design right now a disposable shechita knife with a surgical blade that you can attach it to a handle. You check it, you give it a little bit, you take off maybe some of the minute fine edges on the stone, and you're ready to go. You can shech the whole day with it, you're done, you throw it away. We're working on such a blade, and it's good for people that are on the go, and they don't want to carry a whole portable, disposable blade. Put it onto your little handle, and you're good. We spoke about the concept of the knife being square. The objective of knife being square is because there's an issur of chaloda. Chaloda is stabbing. When you don't have a point, you can't stab. Right? Let's say I want to take the animal, and I have the knife hanging onto the wall, and I want to move the animal back and forth. It's probably something they did in Poland, not by the Yidden, right? Because it sounds very Polish. Why would you want to schlep something that's 500 pounds over a knife, or just move the knife? But let's say you want to do that. There's also a problem of drasa. And therefore, when there's excess weight, there are certain knives that Rabbanim do not like because they're very heavy. And as a result of that, the Maisa Shchita comes in with the weight of the knife, and they're concerned about the concept of a drasa. So you want the knife to be as thin as possible, as light as possible, but as strong as possible. If it's too flimsy, also that would be a concern. In our next episode, I'm going to be showing you a machine that one of my dear Talmidim, Leiby Fisher, has designed in order to take a knife from 90% to perfection in less than 3 seconds. So stay tuned. We're going to have some very, very interesting illustrations. Thank you. Right? What talks about people used to check with their tongues. I don't recommend you do that at home, right? It could be very, very painful.